Hey everybody, this is Russ from Metro Game Core. Today we're going to take a look at the Miyoo Mini Flip. As the name implies, this is a flip version of the original Miyoo Mini. It's got the same screen, same processor. The only other addition besides the clamshell form factor is that this one also has Wi-Fi. So all the stuff that people have loved over the past few years about the Miyoo Mini is all here. You can run OnionOS on it, you can try out MinUI. We're going to test all of that in this video. This is the second flip device we've seen from Miyoo. The original Miyoo Flip came out about a year ago at this point and had some hinge issues, so we'll take a look at the hinge on this one as well. And I will say that over the past few days, I've been really impressed with this tiny little device. It kind of feels like the perfect everyday carry handheld. Not too big, not too small, fits nicely in the pocket, and is also quite cheap. You can find it for around $60 right now. So let's go ahead and dive in and see whether or not the Miyoo Mini Flip is going to be a good fit for you. Okay, it's been a few years since the original Miyoo Mini came out, so let's do a quick recap of its specs. It's running an ARM Cortex dual-core A7 CPU, and it's clocked at 1.2 GHz. You might be surprised that it only has 128 megabytes of RAM, but honestly, it's fine. It's plenty for all the emulation that this processor can handle anyway. Like with the original and the Miyoo Mini Plus, it's got enough power to be able to play up through PS1. And in terms of storage, we've got a single microSD card slot, which is where we'll put our operating system as well as our games. The display here is the same as on the Miyoo Mini version 4, so it's a 2.8 inches diagonally, 4:3 aspect ratio, with a kind of wonky resolution, 750 by 560. If you weren't around in 2022 when the first Miyoo Mini came out, they had a huge hit, but they ran out of screens, and so the original one was 640 by 480, but they ran out, and so eventually they found this BlackBerry one, and that's what they've been using with the version 4 ever since. The original Miyoo Mini was 2000 milliamp hours, and this one's a little bit larger at 2500. I found it got me between 2 and 3 hours of gameplay time, so not the best in the world, but enough for like an everyday carry scenario. And it is surprisingly lightweight. It's 119 grams, or about 4.2 ounces. So yes, it is very small and light. Like I mentioned in the intro, it also comes with Wi-Fi. It's only 2.4 gigahertz, so you're not going to stream games on this, but it'll be enough for things like retro achievements and scraping box art. It's got the same OS options as before, so we'll take a look at both OnionOS and MinUI in this video. Other than that, we don't really have any big surprises here. It's got a rumble motor, it's got mono audio, and really that's about it. Now, for the first time, Miyoo is actually selling this directly on their website. Previously, you had to get it from AliExpress, but now they actually have their own storefront. They're currently selling it for $53 before shipping, and we've got 5 different color options. There is black, white, pink, gray, and yellow. Honestly, I think the yellow is my favorite. I've always really liked this colorway, but the gray looks pretty good too, and that's the one I have to test with. It's going to come with a 64 gigabyte card that is preloaded with games, but of note, the shipping price is not included in this $53, and I've heard on average it's about $20 worldwide. So when all is said and done, we're looking at about $73 to get it shipped to your door, and they've already sold out of their first batch, which are already shipping, but the next batch should be shipping in early November. So I'm kind of thinking of this handheld as being around $65, $70 right now, depending on where you get it, and I think that's a pretty good debut price, and like with a lot of these other handhelds, it will probably go down over time, so once it gets on AliExpress and the retailers start competing with one another, I bet you'll be able to find this around $50, $55 pretty easily. So let's take a look inside of the box, and of note, this was sent directly from Miyoo. Like with all my videos, they're not going to see this ahead of time, all opinions are my own, and no money was exchanged in any way. To start, we've got this plain cardboard box, but inside of it, it actually comes with its own carrying case. I always find it kind of odd that they include a carrying case just because it's a clamshell, it already protects itself, but this does give you space to add additional accessories. So inside, in addition to the device, we've got that 64 gigabyte card, which will come preloaded with the stock operating system, and a bunch of games. We'll take a look at this. It also comes with a short USB-C charging cable, and then also a USB-C to 3.5mm headphone jack adapter. The device does not have a headphone jack out of the box, so this is what you'll have to use if you want to plug it in, but I appreciate that they include this in their device. There are several other much more expensive handhelds that do not have 3.5mm headphone jacks, but they don't include something like this. And of note, I tested the adapter with my own headphones and it worked out fine. It sounded great, everything was playing in stereo, and it got quite loud. So let's take a look at the Miyoo Mini Flip, and my first impression when unboxing it was that, man, this thing is really quite tiny. When comparing it directly with the Miyoo Mini version 4, you can see that yes, it's quite a bit smaller, a little bit thicker, obviously because it is a clamshell, but man, it just feels a lot more pocketable by comparison. Also, one of my favorite things about clamshells is that they are self-protecting, which means that it's going to cover up the screen and the controls. You don't have to worry about them getting bumped or scratched or anything in your pocket or in your bag. And so I feel like that makes it a lot more travel friendly. Now, when you open up the device, it does get quite a bit taller, so we actually have more room to work with in terms of ergonomics compared to the original, but it also closes down really small. So again, another benefit of having a clamshell handheld is that it gets small but also gets big. And because size is such an important factor on a small handheld, let's do a bunch of size comparisons. We'll start with the Miyoo Mini, both closed and open. Here's another small everyday carry style handheld. This is the GKD Pixel 2. This one's got a smaller screen. It's only 2.4 inches and it's made out of metal, so it's quite a bit heavier. Here's a comparison with the Anbernic RG Nano. This one is also made out of metal, but I personally think this one is too small to actually enjoy just because the buttons are just kind of tiny. There's a similar handheld to that is a clamshell. This one is the Funky S. This is actually the original with that same screen and chipset and software, and you can see that this one is just really kind of tiny by comparison to the Miyoo Mini Flip. I reviewed this thing many years ago, and my main complaint was that it's just too small to actually enjoy, much like the RG Nano. And so I love the idea of something this small because it just really easily fits in your pocket, but it's not as easy to use as something like the Miyoo Mini Flip. We'll talk about this more later. Here it is compared to the regular Miyoo Flip, and you can see that, yeah, there's a big size difference here too, both closed and open. The Miyoo Flip does have a larger screen. It's 3.5 inches compared to 2.8. Again, much like the Miyoo Mini Plus and the Miyoo Mini. Here's the size comparison with the Game Boy Advance SP, which is about the same size as the Miyoo Flip as well. And yeah, you can see that the Miyoo Mini Flip is quite a bit smaller. And then finally, one other comparison against my other favorite portable handheld. This is the TrimUI Brick, and this one is quite small as well. It has a 3.2-inch display, so a little bit larger. But when you have the Miyoo Flip opened, it's actually taller than the TrimUI. So when it comes down to it, it kind of feels like the Miyoo Mini Flip is its own unique design. It's not as small as those tiny handhelds, which I think are just too small to enjoy, but it's definitely smaller than a lot of the other everyday carry options that we've seen over the past couple years. When you combine that with the fact that it's an ultra pocketable clamshell, it really does feel like a unique product, in that I've never really seen something that has this excellent mix of really nice controls and size, but then also being very portable. So let's take a look at the device itself. We'll go around and then actually open it up. So on the bottom here, we have our microSD card slot. On the left, we have our volume up and down. And then up top, we have our shoulders and triggers, and then our USB-C charging port. As far as charging compatibility, I've tried a bunch of different USB-C fast charging cables as well as adapters, and most of them will not work, unfortunately. I found a couple like USB-C to USB-C cables that will charge with low power adapters, but it's been pretty few and far between. So it may take some experimenting to find a cable and adapter that works for you, but of course the USB-C to USB-A cables often will work just fine. Now the shoulder and trigger buttons here are very similar to how they were on the Miyoo Flip, so they are micro switches but are heavily padded, and so they just kind of have like a soft squishy feel to them, and they are very quiet. So I actually think they are pretty good, but I do wish they had a little bit more bounce back to them. And I found that when I have the device open, I've got plenty of space for my index fingers unless I go all the way back, and that is a little bit harder to reach, but still, I think the shelf here is relatively large. On the back, we've got this nice ribbing that gives it just a little bit of grip as you're holding it, much like the original Miyoo Mini. And then it looks like we have some passive cooling here as well, at least ventilation for some hot air. So overall, yeah, it's a pretty clean look, and I like the fact that this thing is just so small and pocketable. Now, as we open it up, let's talk about the hinge. It actually opens in 3 different spots, much like other handhelds we've seen. We've got what I consider to be like that laptop angle. Then we have the standard play angle. This is the one that I've been using the most, and then it will also go back. It looks like it's actually a little bit more than 180 degrees. There were a lot of concerns about the Miyoo Flip's hinge. In fact, I made a whole video about it where I used it like 1,000 times and was able to break it. I did the same thing here where I actually tested it for like an hour where I just did this the whole time, and it hasn't been any worse for wear. I think what sets this one apart is that it's a little bit loose in the hinge compared to the Miyoo Flip, which felt really tight and tense, and so it feels like there's a little bit of give and room right here, and hopefully, time will tell whether or not the hinge is going to hold up. If you are concerned about the hinge, my number one recommendation is just to wait and see. There are going to be plenty of people who buy it and, post on Reddit and other social media platforms. So you should get a pretty good idea here pretty soon whether or not the hinge is prone to failure. All I can really say is that over the past few days, I've been doing a lot of testing with this hinge and it hasn't caused any issues so far. So we'll just kind of hold our breath and see how it goes over the long term. Now, as we open it up, you can see that the overall design here is pretty standard. So we've got a D-pad, face buttons, menu button, select and start. All these are very similar to the original Miyoo Mini. The design is a little bit different in that the face buttons do look and feel different than the original. They're pretty similar to the Miyoo Flip, although they do lack analog sticks, which I think just makes sense given that this thing is so small. The face buttons in particular are almost identical between the two, so let's take a closer look at the controls on the Miyoo Mini Flip. And to start, these face buttons do feel great. They are dome switches and they have just a little bit of light travel to them, but they are easy to touch and they have very light pressure to them. Very similar to the original, and so I really like this feeling. It reminds me a lot of the Game Boy Advance SP, which I think is one of the better feeling clamshells of all time. And so yes, if you like the feel of a Game Boy Advance SP, the Miyoo Mini Flip is going to be a very close match. So by far, yes, these face buttons are a big draw for me. I think they are excellent. The other three buttons here, menu, select, and start, they're a little bit different. They have a micro switch kind of feeling to them. They're a little bit louder, but not what I would consider to be loud. They're just really clicky and precise, and they don't take a lot of force either. And so yes, I think these are pretty good too. And then finally, all we have left is this D-pad, which has that same kind of dome switch connection. And yes, it's clicky and light. It doesn't have a lot of travel to it. It's kind of ideal for a clamshell. Because it's using dome switches, that means when doing the contra test, when I press down on the D-pad and rock it left and right, it's not really going to make the character move at all unless I really push it one way or the other. And this is expected behavior when it comes to a dome switch D-pad. It takes quite a bit of force to actually hit those diagonals, which means that it's going to be very precise when playing a platformer like this. The other test I like to do is Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, where I'm testing how easy it is to hit a diagonal when I want to, so my Hadoukens and Choryukens. And personally, I don't really prefer to use dome switches when playing this style of game just because it's not the way that I grew up playing. I played on a Super Nintendo gamepad, which had a rubber membrane connection, so it's a little bit different. So it does take me a few rounds to get used to this setup, but I think with more practice I could get by. The honest truth is that I don't really think that this is a competitive Street Fighter handheld in the first place, but if you just want to knock out a round or two, I think this will work. So when it comes down to it, this D-pad gets the job done. You can move all the directions you want. There are no false diagonals. And I like the fact that it has light travel to it and also doesn't require a lot of force. So in general, I would not say that these buttons are fatiguing in any way. They feel pretty good, but they are kind of cramped, considering the small size of this handheld. And this is probably one of the biggest factors in whether or not you're going to pick up the Miyoo Mini Flip is how it feels in the hands and whether or not it's comfortable. And I think it's very similar to the original Miyoo Mini. If you ever picked up one of these and you thought, man, this thing is just too small to actually enjoy, it's going to be a very similar experience with the Miyoo Mini Flip, but there is a little bit extra space just because the screen is so much higher. So as you hold it, yes, you're going to have to find space for your fingers. Like there's not a lot of space down below, but it's one of those things that I figure is probably pretty good for quick gameplay sessions. And I think this is where it really shines anyway. The fact that it's a clamshell, you can throw it in your pocket, but then open it up and play a few rounds of whatever game you want. It is also small enough for me to easily play one-handed. For example, if I'm playing like a turn-based RPG, this will be just fine, and I've got medium-sized hands. So if you were able to do that with the original Miyoo Mini, you'll be able to do that here as well. So it really comes down to priority. If you want something that is really travel-friendly and pocketable, then I think this is a really big winner. But I wouldn't really consider this to be like your main couch handheld. I think that you can get something a little bit bigger and more comfortable if you don't have to worry about carrying it around in your pocket. So in terms of size and comfort, I kind of think of this as a complementary handheld, something that yes, you can take around with you, but maybe not something that you want to do a marathon session on. Okay, now let's talk about this screen, and one of the big draws of the original Miyoo Mini is that it had these tiny little bezels around the display, and it's pretty much matched up here. I would say it's got a little bit more distance here, but it's still very impressive how small the bezels are on this device overall. Of note, there's a slight lip around the display which gives a little bit of a recess to this screen, and that allows for the controls to protrude a little bit from the shell as well, so it all kind of matches up. And as far as I can tell, this is the exact same screen as the Miyoo Mini, which I've always thought has been pretty good. It can get pretty darn bright, so here it is at max brightness, and then also we can go down to the minimum brightness. It gets pretty dim, but not the dimmest that I've ever seen. Ideally, I would like it to get a little bit darker. I think that would be better for playing it in the dark, but I can't complain about the range that we have here. And in general, I usually play it at about 7 out of 10 brightness. It is bright enough to play outdoors, but I would say just barely. Like, I wouldn't want to play this in direct sunlight, but in the shade, it's going to be okay. Considering that it's a clamshell, which means you're more apt to take it outdoors, I think that something like this is really important. And I would say it just barely makes it in terms of something I would be willing to play outside. The other major factor of this display is it's only 2.8 inches, and so this may be too small for you in most gaming scenarios. It really depends on your eyesight and your age and everything else. For me personally, I think it's just big enough to be able to play on, but ideally I would like to have something that's 3.5 inches or larger. And again, it really comes down to that compromise between the ability to take this around and have it be a very portable system, but then also the fact that it will be a little bit small and squinty at the end of the day. Regardless, I think that the screen quality here is pretty good, much like it was on the Miyoo Mini version 4, so no major complaints from me. Now let's take a look at the audio. I don't have super high expectations given that this is a small handheld with a mono speaker, but let's take a listen. And I think it gets the job done. It gets loud enough to be able to fill a room, and it is sharp and clear. Not the best audio in the world, but for this price point and this size, I think it's good enough. So let's take a quick look at the stock operating system here. So this is what's going to come on that 64GB card out of the box. And it's the same setup that we've seen with their other devices. So you can go in here, you've got the game section, which you can then pull by system. And we've got quite a few options here. And like I mentioned already, this is a preloaded card. So when we go in here, you can see there's 429 Super Nintendo games. So you'll be able to browse through this. It's going to scan it that very first time. But after that, you can go through. It's even got box art added and everything. And you can launch your game from here. Beyond that, we've got the RetroArch section, which will open up all the different cores, so you can then launch your games from a core specifically. We've also got an app section, which will allow you to jump into RetroArch directly, or maybe a file explorer, and so on. And then finally, we've got the settings tab. Within here, you can do things like adjust the brightness and turn on Wi-Fi and connect to your network. And then you also have a color option. This is the same thing that we saw in the Miyoo Mini and the Miyoo Mini Plus, which will allow you to adjust things like the hue and the saturation to really dial it in to what you would like. We've also got quite a few language options, including simplified and traditional Chinese, Spanish, Japanese, Korean, as well as Portuguese. You've also got an auto power off option, which I believe will turn the device off after a few minutes of sleep. You can also turn on the hibernation, so this means that after some time, it'll time out and actually put it to sleep as well. Now, to launch a game, all you have to do is just go into the menu and then choose the game, and it'll go from there. From there, you can press the menu button. Here you can save and load a state. You can go to native menu, which is just RetroArch, or you can also exit the game. And that's really about it. It's a very simple interface altogether. So the stock operating system is a pretty simple setup. If you just want to launch the games that come with the card, then no harm, no foul. It's all going to work just fine. But the beauty of these devices are the custom operating system options that have been developed over the past few years. Let's start by talking about OnionOS, which by far is the most popular option for the Miyoo Mini and Miyoo Mini Plus. And thankfully, it works just fine on this as well. All I did was pulled out my card from one of my other devices, put it in here, and it booted right up. And what makes OnionOS so fun is that it's really robust. You've got a lot of different options, but it also appears very simple. Again, we can go in here into the game section, we can choose our device, and then launch the game from here, but we've got a couple additional options, like the fact that this has network options, which allows us to go in and scrape the box art if we would like as well. So if you want to have the box art as you navigate through your games, you can do that directly on the device thanks to having Wi-Fi. There are also a ton of different platforms that are supported on OnionOS compared to the stock operating system. Now, I just kind of stick to the basics. You can see it's all just your standard systems, but you can really get into the weeds here. I'll leave a link to the Onion website down below and my most recent guide, which will still work on this device as well. There's also an app section, and within here you can curate which apps will actually show off, and you've got a ton of different cool options like tracking your activity to see how long you've been playing each game, switching out the themes and the boot logos and everything else. There's a ton of different options here. I'm not going to go too far into the weeds just because my latest guides will walk you through it, but yes, you've got a ton of options here, but I love the fact that it's still a very simple interface. The other main draw of OnionOS is what they call the game switcher. If we tap on the menu button at any time, it's going to show us all of the games that we have most recently played. And so you can navigate through them. And the cool thing about this is that these are actually the save states that you have already loaded up. So if we choose a game and then we press the A button, it's going to not only launch the game, but take us exactly to where we were before. To get out of the game, all you have to do is tap on the menu button. It's going to take you back to the game switcher. So this is a really great way to just basically play a bunch of games at once. And so this is part and parcel with the OnionOS experience, is to have that game switcher, which will allow you to kind of navigate through and decide which game you want to play and when. The only thing missing on OnionOS right now is the device does not go to sleep when you close the lid. It does on the stock operating system, but unfortunately not on this. Now, I talked to a member of the dev team and they plan on working on it, but they don't have any units just yet to start their development. So I would expect to see an update to OnionOS in the future, which will add that functionality as well, which is, one of the best things about having a clamshell. So hopefully we'll see that soon. Another OS experience I really like on this device is called MinUI, and this was recently updated just the other day to support the Miyoo Mini Flip. This one is super bare bones. It allows you to basically just navigate through your system and then choose your game. It's a super simple setup. In fact, this one is so simple that this is what I install when I hand it off to like a family member. If I'm going to make a device for them, I usually will put MinUI on it just because it's so intuitive and easy to use. I was looking at my website the other day and I realized that I don't have a generic MinUI starter guide. And so I ended up making one, and it's publishing at the same time as this video coming out. And so if you want to learn how to set up MinUI and some of the additional tweaks that you can do with it, I've now made this guide, which I will leave linked down below. Now, by design, this OS is very simple, so it's only really going to play your very kind of standard systems, your Nintendo and Sega and Sony systems, and that's about it. But I also kind of like the sheer simplicity of that as well. It allows me to really focus on the games that I want to play. One tweak that I do like to do with MinUI is that I like to add the box art as well. It's all included in my written guide, and so I'm able to navigate through, but then also see some box art on the side, and so I like the combination there. And one thing I really love about this OS as well is that it is super fast. As soon as you press that button, the game almost instantly starts, which is awesome. From there, it's a very simple way to get into the menu. You just tap on the menu button and then you can save your state, go into the options to refine it a little bit more, or you can quit out of your game. And really, that's about it. Within the options menu, you do have a bunch of different things that you can configure. One of my favorites are the shortcuts. So you can go in here and make hotkeys. So for example, you can see that menu and start will save and quit my game. So let's say I'm in the middle of Earthworm Jim and I want to close out of my game. I can either just go and press the menu and go down to quit, or because I have that hotkey, I can now press menu and start, and that's going to close out of my game and save it at the same time. And once you've made a save state like that, you will see this X button says resume. And so now the next time I want to play Earthworm Jim, I can either press the A button to start the game from scratch, or I can press X, and that's actually going to take me right back to where I was, and it starts almost instantly. Now, MinUI already supports the lid function, so if I close it, you can see it goes to sleep right there. And so when you have it closed, it's going to stay like this for about 2 minutes. You'll see this green light, but then after that, it'll actually put the device to sleep. And then all you have to do is just press the power button to turn it back on. It'll still resume exactly where you were in your game. So it's pretty great, where if you're only going to be closing it for a couple minutes, you have like instant access back to your game. But if you close it and leave it, it's not going to drain your battery because it'll turn itself off after a couple minutes. The great thing is that all three of these operating systems work really well. It really depends on what your goals are. If you want something super simple, you can't be bothered with adding games, then the stock operating system is going to be your best bet. If you want to be able to jump into additional features and tweaks, then I think OnionOS is going to be a better fit. And then if you want something that's just ultra simple, that is intuitive, then I think that MinUI is a really excellent choice as well. So we've got lots of different options here, and honestly, none of them are going to be wrong. Now, as far as performance, this is going to be exactly like you may expect if you know about the Miyoo Mini and the Miyoo Mini Plus. It's going to be able to play up through PS1, and the performance on all of these is going to be pretty darn great. A lot of this is really thanks to the emulation development teams over the years, because when it first came out, this device had all sorts of issues, screen tearing and performance lag, but over time they refined it over and over again, and now it's to the point where yes, all these systems are going to play great. For this footage right here, I'm using OnionOS, but the performance will be largely the same between the stock and OnionOS as well as MinUI. So long story short, if you're looking to play the retro systems specifically, Game Boy systems, your 8-bit and 16-bit consoles, and then things like arcade and PS1, all this is going to play great, but it is going to cap out there. This is definitely not a device to push performance. It's really just a matter of whether or not you want your classic game systems on the go without having to carry around something that's a lot larger. The only major concern I had over my time of testing is that the device will get warm after a few minutes of playing, which I think makes sense given the fact that it's so small, there's not a lot of space for the heat to go. And so here's a worst case scenario. I found it getting about 41, 42 degrees Celsius when playing something like PlayStation 1, which is going to be one of the hardest systems that you can play on this device. Now, the human body, like skin temperature, is usually around like 32, 34 degrees Celsius, so you are going to feel this warmth overall. It's not to the point of being like super uncomfortable, but definitely something that I noticed. It also gets warm on the back, but near the screen part right here on this shelf of your shoulder and trigger buttons, about 40 degrees. So if you are looking to, rest your index fingers up there, you'll feel a little bit of that warmth as well. It gets about 37 degrees on the back here, which I think is not bad, just to the point where you can barely notice it. The place where it bothers me the most is kind of near the D-pad, kind of close to the center. It's going to be about 44 degrees Celsius here, and that is definitely enough for me to notice it. And so it does get quite warm, not to the point, again, where I think it's hot. It's not going to burn me or anything, but it is something that I notice over time. And I think it lends itself to the fact that this is a device that's more suited for pick up and play gaming and not necessarily a primary handheld where you're going to be sitting on the couch and playing it for hours on end. So for me, the convenience of being able to pop in and out of my game just for a few minutes here and there while on the go definitely outweighs the fact that it gets a little bit warm if I play it for more than say 5 or 10 minutes. All right, I think I've covered everything I wanted to in this review. Let's go ahead and start wrapping up and talk about what I like and what I don't like about the Miyoo Mini Flip. Number one really has to do with its size. It really feels like an everyday carry handheld. It's smaller than a lot of the 3.5-inch options that we have, but it's not too small to the point where it's uncomfortable to play. I think it really shines as a pocketable and portable handheld, something you can throw in your purse or maybe in your pocket, and it's not going to take up a lot of additional space, but it's always great to have Mario on hand if you want him. I also love these software options that we have here. None of them are bad. The stock operating system works, and also we've got OnionOS if you want to really dive into it, and then we've got that really simple MinUI as well. And so I love the fact that we're able to rest on the shoulders of emulation development over the past several years. It's not often when a device debuts with fully formed software, but that's what we have with the Miyoo Mini Flip. I also think the screen quality here is good. It's got a pretty high resolution for the size of the handheld, and it also gets quite bright, to the point where, yes, I can play it outdoors. And then finally, I also really like these controls. They are precise and tight, and they also do not require a lot of force, so they are not fatiguing. When you put it all together, it's kind of a perfect storm of a pocketable device with a good quality screen, excellent controls that is wrapped together with a bunch of different software options. Now, of course, it's not perfect, and I do have 3 different things to mention here. The first is that it gets quite warm. It really doesn't depend on what you're playing. Even Game Boy games will make the device slightly warm after a few minutes. It never got to the point where I would consider it to be a big problem, but if you are sensitive to warm devices like me, you may not like this overall feel. Another thing I've noticed over the past few days is that the battery life is not great, especially compared to other devices that you can get around this price point. I've got on average about 2 or 3 hours max. Now, I don't think that's the end of the world, especially with a pick up and play device like this. I don't expect to ever sit down and play it for 2 or 3 hours, but it does mean that you may have to charge it a little bit more than some other devices. And then finally, the big unknown here is the hinge and whether or not it's going to stand the test of time. I've only had it for a few days. I've probably opened and closed it about 1,000 times at this point, and I'm not seeing any issues right now, but it often will take a lot of time and a bunch of other people playing with it to really find these problems. systems. So I'm not saying there are any hinge issues right now, but it is worth considering if you are going to pick up this device. It's always in your best interest to wait until later. So when it comes down to it, I think the Miyoo Mini Flip is an excellent handheld, but it kind of feels a little bit out of time. By that I mean that if this had come out in 2022 or 2023, I think it would have taken the handheld world by storm. It really is a wonderful mixture of software and controls and screen, and the fact that it is super small and pocketable. Its main limitations is that it only plays up to PS1 when we have a lot of other systems that will play more, and a lot of handheld enthusiasts probably already own a device that can play all these systems anyway, and so there may not be a lot of appeal and draw for this device like it was a few years ago. But when all is said and done, the fact that there are plenty of other good handhelds out there right now doesn't change the fact that this one right here, the Miyoo Mini Flip, is an excellent little handheld as well. So if you are looking for something with this size, this level of power, and at this price point, yes, it's a pretty easy device to recommend. My only other reservation is that hinge. We don't know if this thing is going to last forever or not, and only time will tell. But as it stands right now, I'm pretty happy with this thing, and I do plan on using this as like my little everyday carry handheld going forward. So let me know what you think of the Miyoo Mini Flip. Are you going to pick one of these up? Which color do you think looks the best? And let me know if you have any hinge issues in the comments as well. I would love to hear about that too. As always, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful. We will see you next time. Happy gaming.